Okay, so welcome to yet another fantastic episode of My Dog Will Eat My Face. And if any listeners out there knew the origin of the okay greeting in the very beginning, they will forever capture my heart. Hint, it was a pretty popular Flash animation that came out, 15 years ago, maybe longer, 20 years ago, maybe not that long, somewhere in there, before YouTube really took off. So it was a Flash animation. But anyway, despite that weird tangent, let me get back to what I want to talk about today. As I've said prior to this episode, I am sort of in a state of limbo. I currently do not have any access to palliative care or hospice care, so I'm just pretty much a regular Joe, pardon the pun, like anyone else sitting out there, perhaps also on Medicare. That's my only source of insurance that I've had since I lost my Cadillac insurance plan when my last employer canceled it on me. So, I have reached out to basically a couple new hospice providers to see what they may be able to provide with respect to hospice care. Now, I also reached out to my former provider whose brand new medical director essentially kicked me to the curb in less than 2 weeks since she came on the job. She didn't know me. She got my name wrong in person multiple times. And it was pretty egregious what she did. And she's still there, I'm sure, as the new medical director. Now, she said rather cryptically that I should reapply back to that provider, and I would possibly, her word, quote unquote, scare quotes around that, possibly regain service with them. So I went ahead and entertained that. That is, I'm allowing them to visit me again tomorrow afternoon to see if I qualify, so to speak, for their hospice program that I was already in for an extended, long period of time before I was so brutally kicked to the curb. And so that leaves me possibly at a point where I might have to be in a little bit of a conundrum, in that if these other companies that I really don't know much about, except they were suggested to me by my former social worker, who I have always adored. And she did recommend these two other services to me. Now, I might be in a position where my old provider may be willing to re-embrace me in the warmth of their caring service. Or I pick a brand new service with no real previous history, not knowing precisely if they're worse or better, except I did get one recommendation from someone I know and trust for both these service providers. So that recommendation is a strong positive. I didn't just go to these services through a Google search or something simple as that. At least it was a reference that someone suggested that these were good providers, essentially. And I might be in a position in this turtle race that I'm running between all these sluggish providers. They can't seem to pick up any pace. I might be in a strange position to where I'll have to choose. Do I go back to that warm, cozy, familiar service provider if they're so sweet to take me back after they involuntarily discharged me? Or do I try someone new? So I'm going to talk today a little bit about strategy, believe it or not. And I'm going to try to apply that to this scenario and see how that actually goes. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Literally, I'm going to talk about strategic theory. How exciting is that? But some of these are things that I've been aware of for a very long time. That is, these strategy suggestions. And I do have a handicap, so to speak, with one very key element of the most successful type of strategy. And I plan to talk about that. And these are things that can be applied in any situation in life, from day-to-day decisions with who you're dealing with in your day-to-day life, to so far as major diplomatic actions and, believe it or not, major diplomacy deals and even military action. So this might get a little deep, but I will first give, before we dive down that rabbit hole, a quick summary of the last report I did get from my cardiologist, who I just visited last week. So I took advantage of being back on a regular old-fashioned Medicare, at least, to go see my cardiologist service provider so they could collect more data points. And it's actually those data points that my cardiologist said he talked to the medical director at my old provider, and she said I should reapply and possibly be approved. So, I'm going to talk about first those very real facts. Boy, I can't really enunciate that T. It really sounds like I'm saying facts. Oh my God, it sounds like the exact same word. I will fax it to you. These are important facts. Golly. I need to go to enunciation training. Good grief. Anyway. So I'm going to talk about that first. That is what was in my cardiology report from last week that I guess pried my previous medical director to say, oh, well, maybe you should reapply then. Great, thanks. Now, it's very depressing, to be honest. The report from my cardiologist is not filled with ooey gooey happy news. It's quite the antithesis. But strangely, it might be key to me getting the appropriate level of service that I want, that I think will help me the most, and has already helped me the most with staying alive. So, let me get right to it then. So, getting to what my cardiologist found in my impromptu visit last week, in which I was able to get another echocardiogram, which is super duper fun, new EKG, and a new clinical visit with my cardiologist. Now, for me to do this task, it was an incredible feat of logistics and issues. To put it mildly for me, first of all. It's not a short drive necessarily. It's not too bad. It's about a half-hour drive to get to where my cardiologist is. That's not bad. But since I'm on 8 liters of oxygen when I'm moving around or doing any activity, I will go through possibly a tank, depending on traffic, each way, getting there and coming back. And now I have to carry 2 oxygen tanks with me, and maybe even a third for backup. And if you've ever held these large oxygen e-tanks, they're the big ones, mind you, they are quite heavy. So, I am not the most physically fit, you may be surprised to hear, that would make it easy for me. So, I actually had to use my hospice volunteer from before for his help to get there and to get home. And to get there, I got rid of my car because I was fainting all the time. I didn't want to drive and hurt someone. I couldn't live with that. So I literally sold my Beamer. So I got rid of it. I had a BMW 3 Series before this. Since I was fainting still periodically, no way. I would never get behind the wheel of a car and risk it. I couldn't do that. It's almost like drinking and driving. There's no way. So I sold it off. It was kind of sad. Now I don't have a car. I've always had really cool cars in my adult life, so this is kind of sad for me to get rid of my car. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent. So he had to help me out to get there. He drove there. He also handled these heavy oxygen tanks that I would never have a chance in hell of handling. And in addition to that, I also needed it, I requested and got a wheelchair upon check-in because their facility is so huge. My God, I mean, it's such a huge facility. It's like a 2-block walk from the entrance to the last elevator bay, which goes to their cardiac clinic. And I said, it's some sort of joke when I was there, that they put the cardiology clinic in the very last elevator bay, letter from A down to E. So we're talking about maybe 2 blocks walk from the main entrance, literally the very last end from the main lobby. You've got to go to there to find the elevator that will take you to the cardiac clinic. And I asked them, I was there, is this some sort of Machiavellian joke that they've done in this design? And they said, no, it's an issue. I guess some architects for hospitals just don't plan things out well all the time. So anyway, my volunteer, my friend, he's a friend now. I mean, he didn't have to help me since I was discharged, but he still did. So I thank him dearly for his help. He's awesome. And without his help, I don't think I could have gone to get this done. Because I have no other friends willing to help. I have no local family willing to help. I really don't have any local support whatsoever from my friends. That is my normal friends from before. Lo and behold, they're only fair weather friends I've had. They're fun friends. They only want to do fun things. They don't want to do helpful things or nice things with me necessarily. It's only fun for many of them. And my family, that is helpful are all out of state. They're in California and Arizona. So I really don't have any local support. And so that's very difficult for me to get through this. But without his help, I would have never have made it there to see him, the cardiologist that is. So again, he's awesome. He did a great helpful thing, and I thank him dearly. So, based on that cardiac visit, my cardiologist sent notes back to the medical director. He actually called her and talked to her, in which she said I should reapply then and probably be approved to resume service. Something like that. It was a conditional word in there somewhere. And the problem, first of all, that he very eloquently spelled out was it is impossible for him or anyone else to provide an actual, clear, and precise prognosis with respect to my mortality, how long I'll live, and how long I can survive under the extreme conditions in which I suffer. The reason is because I am actually the very first person in human recorded history to ever be born with this congenital defect. Now, it's not a delusion of grandeur. There are absolutely no preceding cases to refer this to. And my anatomy has become completely unique, using my cardiologist's words, not my own, because of the damage that was done to my body from these issues. And thus my body had to basically adapt or die. And luckily for me, my body chose the latter. It's very weird, though, to say that. My body chose, right? I mean, my body chose. Well, first of all, I reject the notion that I even have a body. I am my body, is my contention. Because that's all I am. I frankly don't think I have a soul. There, I'll say it. I have a brain. It's self-conscious, but that brain needs all the working parts that are below it. It's not just a head and a vat to work. It's got to have lungs, a heartbeat, calcium, potassium, oxygen especially, that's the biggest one, nitrogen, etc., to function accordingly. That's why I have to eat and digest these things, to turn these things into these base elements that could be reabsorbed after being broken down and absorbed by my body to replenish these components. It's truly remarkable, though, when you think about it. All the things our bodies do, again, there I am saying our bodies. I should say, frankly, from my perspective, it's amazing what we all do to adapt, to live, to survive. It's remarkable to me. And if you look at humans throughout history, they are more than anything a very adaptable species. Humans, for the last 100,000 to 200,000 years that we've been on this planet, have adapted despite all the various horrific challenges we had faced in that time, coming to the near extinction of our species multiple times. There's times when I think we were down to approximately 700 people, maybe far less, through one extinction event alone. Think about that. It's remarkable. And in fact, everyone out there who has blue eyes and or blonde hair, everyone who has that, myself included, I have like blue-green eyes, so yeah, I'm in this camp myself. All of us are actually descended from one ancestor thousands upon thousands and thousands of years ago. Because it is a recessive gene in our bodies that cannot be duplicated in a new human if another gene of any sort, brown hair, brown eyes, let's say, black hair, brown eyes, whatever, is introduced. It's simply bred out. It is recessive. It needs the gene from both parents on some level to reproduce. Now, my father has brown eyes and black hair. My mom has, well, no eyes. She's dead now, but she had blue eyes and almost a strawberry blonde hair kind of thing. I don't know what I call it. Light brown, very light brown. But my dad clearly carries some blue eye genetics with him to some extent because I popped out with blue eyes. And the only way for that to happen is for that gene appearing in both parents. So that means that my father didn't have blue eyes in either of his parents, both of his parents to get the blue eye gene. But he did pass it on down to me somehow as a recessive gene, and so it's just recessive in him. It's not visible. You won't see it, even though it's in the genetic code somewhere. It's recessive. Whereas my mom had both parents give it to her, so she had blue eyes and like a strawberry blondish light brown hair, and therefore popped out me. All with brown hair and blue greenish eyes. Anyway, sorry about that tangent, but the point is that I've adapted. And my doctor very clearly spells it out in his notes. It's remarkable that somehow my body has adapted to the circumstances in which I've been dealt. And that includes a protein C deficiency, which means there's all kinds of clotting issues in my body. And that's probably what caused my birth defect in the first place. I was born with no right pulmonary artery at all. Also, though, today, I have no femoral arteries whatsoever functioning in either leg. No femoral arteries functioning in either leg. By all measures, I should not be able to walk. But I do. He says very clearly, one femoral artery is completely absent, the other one is completely occluded and being reabsorbed by the body. Remarkable. And how my body, I keep saying that, how I have adapted, apparently, is I've grown all these circumnavigating concentric peripheral blood vessels throughout these areas where there was occlusion of the major artery. So I have these big tangled messes, basically, of blood vessels that don't exist in any other human being. In my chest and lungs, and also in my legs and thighs and hips. Because I clearly walk. I do. But my femoral arteries are kaput. So, he also said that, oh, by the way, I've seen images of these blood vessels of which I speak, these concentric circles of peripheral vessels to deliver oxygen and blood in absence of the other arteries, major arteries. And I've seen them with my own eyes. I mean, I've seen pictures that they have of these things inside me. And the body just produced it on its own. So his problem is I can't go into any additional surgeries to save me, because if he cuts me open, I will have a unique anatomy. The things that are supposed to be there are absent. And instead, there's this tangled web of these concentric peripheral vessels. It looks like a big ball of cobwebs. And he doesn't know if he can cut one or two and nothing happens, or if I go into immediate cardiac arrest, or I go into brain death. He has no idea. These things don't exist in other people. And this exists within me. I'm sure this also exists in other humans out there, this adaptability. I know it does. It's must. I'm not special, to be blunt. It's out there. And humans have demonstrated that over thousands of years. Very adaptable. Also, he said, somehow, no, this is where he doesn't know, somehow his body has adapted to the extreme and high pressures that have basically led to severe pulmonary hypertension and then congestive heart failure. The pressures in my heart and lungs are so high, the mortality rate is far too high for any surgical team, including the best one in the world at Berkeley, I think it was, where they said they cannot operate because of these pressures. The mortality rate, just with that data point, is way too high for them to do it. I would not survive. So there's two reasons why they can't operate. One, the unique anatomy. Two, the high pressures that I've adapted to. And frankly, he doesn't understand how. No one does. Because I'm the first case that's ever been recorded. I doubt I'm the first case ever. But at least in recorded history, because if I existed in the 1700s, say, I'd be SOL on day one. I'd die as an infant. Absolutely. You know. But nowadays, with some modern medicine, I've been able to survive. As Darwin himself once said, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, but the one most adaptable to change. And so, also within this history, he mentioned that I had a pulmonary embolism in 2011, which is also, in my understanding, certain death, but, I mean, that's what killed George Patton, who lived through World War II. He died of a pulmonary embolism while in the hospital after a car accident in Germany after the war. So, I didn't know this, frankly. I had a pulmonary embolism. I remember the moment, but I don't remember them telling me what it actually was, I guess, or I misunderstood it. I didn't realize it was a pulmonary embolism, so I was shocked to see that in my history. Honestly, I didn't know that. And my understanding is, like, yeah, with that, you don't pass go, you don't collect $100, you go straight to hell. It's over. So, I don't know how I survived that again. Don't know. So these are the problems in which my doctors face. They can't predict any sort of mortality or prognosis even. Because I'm writing the rule book right now as we move forward in time. I'll be the first one I'll set the precedent. They've already written papers on my medical issues. I know this. My cardiologist currently has done it. They've been published. My first cardiologist when I was a baby also did so. Those were published. I've seen these publications, these medical publications. They were actually copied to me by my cardiologist. I didn't understand a lick of it because I'm not a doctor or a cardiologist. And no, I'm not in there by name. He describes me as a blah-blah-year-old male, whatever. I'm not named, of course, but I know these were about me, and I've seen them. It's not a delusion of grandeur, so I'm just getting that out of the way right now. So some of this sounds delusional, delusions of grandeur to say these things, but they're true, and they're not necessarily grandeur, because this really sucks for me that I have severe pulmonary hypertension. I am still in a terminal stage of heart failure, which is what he also said. He said he's clearly still in a terminal stage of heart failure. In fact, the plasma that they use to detect in blood tests to measure damage done to the heart, it's abbreviated as, I believe, BEP. I don't know what that stands for. I could look it up. I'm not going to. It doesn't matter what it stands for. It's called BEP, whatever. A normal rate is below 100. I have no clue what the measurements are. Again, I'm an idiot. I'm not a doctor. I worked in legal. I'm too stupid for this stuff. And it's just really problematic, I guess, when you're dealing with federal guidelines, so to speak, with Medicare and hospice care, because you can't predict anything. And anyway, I forgot to finish my other statement. My gosh, you see how absent-minded I am? My goodness. BEP, for me, initially, that was used as a justification to kick me out of hospice, frankly, in one aspect. Came as a 97, where I was supposed to be 100. Again, I don't know what the measurement is. I'm not a doctor. I worked in legal. I don't know this stuff. But I can tell you all day about legal regulations, but I don't know anything about biology. I'm an idiot. So, went from 97 to, in my last visit just last week, over 1,300. So it went from 97 to over 1,300 in the matter of a few weeks. That's not good. Sure, helps get me back in a hospice. But for someone who has always wanted to live a normal and active life, it does suck, no matter how you put it. But at least I'm adaptable to be alive now. I think I'm alive. Pretty sure I'm alive right now. Yep. That was my hand. Oh, sorry. And there's my dog now going, it's okay, buddy. That was me. There's proof I'm alive. I'm not a ghost. So, yeah. I'm still alive. That's the good side. I've upset my dog. That's the bad side. So, I'm going to calm a dog. and move on to the next subject. Oh, one more thing. With respect to my visit to my cardiologist that I'd like to share. Since I did mention my dog just now, he's in the subject of my podcast. He's actually a certified emotional support animal, or ESA. He wasn't before I adopted him, but I got him certified as that. And it's not that difficult. And it allows me pretty much to go anywhere I want with him. So he came with me to see my cardiologist. So here I was getting wheeled away on this wheelchair in there with oxygen tanks and a hose attached to me, whatever. And there was my little man on my lap, checking everyone out, looking at things, just chilling. And at one point, I even got a ham sandwich and gave him a few pieces of ham that he ate and enjoyed. I shared. It actually, it really helped. We know emotion is a big part of physical issues. They're inseparable. So if you are dealing with medical issues, I would really challenge you to explore that option if you haven't done so already. Maybe you already have what would qualify as an emotional support animal in your possession, but getting them certified as that, it costs money. But getting them certified as an ESA allows you to pretty much take them anywhere. And another fun fact, if you're a renter, and if your landlord charges you pet rent, if you have an ESA, they may not legally charge you pet rent anymore. They can't charge pet rent for an ESA. And also, a lot of businesses that say no animals allowed or whatever, look for their signs that say, except service dogs. Service dogs are allowed. At least, it's usually a dog. Maybe they say service animals. Now, if you have a pet like a goldfish or a snake, I don't know if you could get that qualified as an ESA, frankly. But if you have a cat, a dog, a bunny, I don't know, something like that, that really emotionally soothes you, frankly, that could be like a lot of small mammals, a bunny, a hamster, I'm not kidding. Holding them and petting them, it's an emotional release. But dogs are an easy one because they're usually what is out there. So, but it's not restricted to dogs. It's an ESA, emotional support animal. So, I would implore you, I challenge you to pursue that. It does help with some things. And it can help a lot when you're going to these appointments to have that emotional support with you. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you weaker. It makes you stronger. Almost sounds like I'm quoting Nietzsche now. Anyway, so I would challenge you to pursue that. And also, I can save you financially. A little sneaky. Anyway, I digress. Get it down. Back to what I really wanted to discuss. So, when I spoke to my former medical director before discharge, She said she needs objective data, not subjective, to make a decision. And I at first agreed. I said, yes, so do I. I love objective data, so I'm right there with you. But I thought about that. And I realized that's a very common logical fallacy, actually, I hanged here. And I said this to her face when she did the discharge. She probably didn't care one bit. But I wasn't a pushover about it, and that's some foreshadowing for later. When she discharged me, I flatly told her that I think the language used when I said I agree with you about objective data, I think the word need was the wrong word. But rather, it should be I want objective data. The problem is, in my case, because there is no prognosis, there's no precedent, they don't know. We're writing it as I go. Right now, this is it. I told her that's really a logical fallacy that was used here. And that is, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And that is a very common logical fallacy that people do find themselves trapped in, so to speak. It's a major logical fallacy. Just because you don't have the evidence, it doesn't mean there is no evidence there. And in fact, if there is no evidence whatsoever, it doesn't mean that the condition you're trying to describe, whatever it is, exists or doesn't exist. It's a null. It can't be a factor in that decision. It's actually not dissimilar to the legal rules in this country of the USA, where I feel more comfortable. Again, I used to work in legal. But in this country, we have, through our Constitution and Bill of Rights, anyone who is accused of a crime is not guilty. They're presumed not guilty until proved so by the accuser, the state. Beyond any reasonable doubt. You'll hear that. Beyond any reasonable doubt. Of course, you've all heard this, probably. And that's very similar to that logical fallacy, I think. Just because you don't have the facts or the data. Oh, facts. There's that word again. God! Just because you don't have the data. I give up on trying to enunciate the T there. I need to take a class. Anyway, just because you do not have the data points, it is not evidence that can be used against you. Just because you remain silent and say nothing doesn't mean you're guilty of anything whatsoever. The burden of proof is on the person making the claim. The claim here being made by my doctor was, I don't think you qualified for hospice care because I don't have any objective evidence. So, that's what I should have said. Well, I more or less did in a more, I guess, precise way, but it doesn't matter. That's a null value. It can't be used against you in the court of law. The burden of proof is on the state. Or in civil cases, the plaintiff through a preponderance of evidence, which just means 51%. Civil infractions are much easier to prove than criminal infractions. They only have to prove 51% of the facts to demonstrate that you have done this. Versus in a criminal act, it has to be beyond any reasonable doubt whatsoever. So that's a much higher standard. And frankly, this is what actually perturbs me. I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I am so sorry, guys and gals. I'm just... A lot of states these days have moved... usually the first DUI charge. Now, I'm not advocating driving while drinking. Obviously, I don't want to drive when I know I have fainting spells. I've never driven drunk in my life. I won't do it. Period. That is way too sketchy for me. I am not going to be responsible for killing somebody or hurting somebody or their property. No, I'm not going to do it. That's crazy. What if I kill a little kid crossing the street? Can you imagine? My life would be over. Everything over. I would never be able to get past that. At that point, I'd be happy to welcome any and all punishment that may be brought upon me, and even death in any form in which it may come, if it is a case where I actually hurt a child, frankly. I don't care. I'm not going to do it as best as I can. If I do it ever by accident, that's it. It's over. I would accept it as that's the end of me. I can't live with that. I just can't. That's my decision. Anyway. So getting back to the point. I'm not saying drinking and driving is a swell thing to do. But at this point does antagonize me a bit. A lot of states have moved the first DUI infraction to a civil case, a non-criminal case. Maybe the second, third, fourth, whatever, those are criminal offenses. But they're saying, oh, well, a first DUI is frankly just a civil infraction, so it's not a criminal infraction. And that is total bull to me, frankly. If you are getting arrested, handcuffed by the police, and put in the back of a cop car, can you name me any other civil case situation in which the police would do that? No. If you call the police and say, I want you to come enforce this contract for me by arresting my hairdresser, I don't know, they'd laugh in your face. I'm sorry, we don't enforce civil infractions. This isn't a police issue, but they still do it with DUIs, and they call the first one civil cases. Ugh. So, one, it's just not true in my mind. It's a heinous crime. It shouldn't be seen as a civil infraction, first of all. But it's also a cunning trap that I don't like. The states that do that move it to a civil infraction, they do it because they only have to demonstrate for the first DUI a preponderance of evidence, only 51%, as opposed to beyond any reasonable doubt, which is what has to be demonstrated in a criminal case, which is a much, much, much higher standard. So, they basically made this easy to convict people on their first DUI. But if the police ever tell you, don't worry, it's only a civil infraction for the first DUI, that's total baloney. You should worry about it, right? And two, the only reason why they did that is because it's easier to prove. The evidence required is at a substantially lower standard. And so you're going to be found guilty more likely than any other case. Name me one other criminal act in which it's considered civil, or a civil act considered criminal. No, they don't exist. Maybe an evictions, a little bit, right? But that's another story. I'm not going to go down in that. I'm sorry, that's a whole other deal. But that's a pet peeve of mine when states do that. I'm just saying. I'm not advocating driving drunk by all means. But they're reducing the standard just to make you easier to prove guilty. That's the problem. It's a cunning trick that state legislators are doing. And petition your government, talk to your state legislators about it. I would say that's BS. Keep it as a criminal case. They only like to keep it as a civil case to just make it easier to prove. And obviously, a lot of people did embrace that. You know, like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers were a big campaigner against that. Or for that, excuse me. And it sounds good, right? Well, this will make it easier to catch drunk drivers. Oh, sure, I don't want drunk drivers on the road. Yeah, that's cool. But frankly, to me, there's no other civil infraction in which you're handcuffed and hauled off to jail. Period. And there's no other civil case in which the cops will agree to come and take action. They'll laugh at you. They'll say, this is not a police action. I can't do anything. Now, there's some cases, like I said, eviction might be a little hokey. Once you get the judgment and writ for eviction, you can have the sheriff kick them out. So that's a little different. And there's a few others out there kind of like that. So this isn't universal by any means. I'm sorry. But for the most part, that's the way it's structured. And I'm sorry. When the sheriff comes, they don't handcuff you. They just throw your stuff on the street, change the locks, and say bye. You know, if you assault them or something, that's a criminal charge that you're getting. If you interfere with them doing it, that's a criminal charge. And if you just stand there and watch them carry your stuff out to the street and change the locks on you, and then they say adios, and you're like, cool. You're not going to get arrested, right? If you assault a cop, obviously a sheriff deputy, you're going to get in trouble. If you disrupt their ability to perform their duties, you can get in trouble. It's called obstruction of justice. Don't do that. If you just stand there and watch them, that's totally cool. They won't handcuff you and take you to jail. That's the point I'm trying to make. even in evictions. And trespassing is kind of similar, so that's another story. I'm sorry. I gotta deviate off legal issues, my God. Back to the topic at hand. I even forgot what the topic at hand was. Anyway, yes, so my medical director engaged in a severe logical fallacy, and I said so to her face. She probably, I'm quite certain, did not care whatsoever. But I had to say it. I'm not going to be a pushover, which leads me to the main thing I wanted to talk about today. Oh my God, this is going to be a long podcast. I hope not too long, but hang on to your butts. We're moving on. Okay. Moving on. I'm so sorry, by the way. That was a huge deviation of my incessant rambling, and I apologize. But if you made it through that, I implore you to stay with me just a teeny bit longer to one little point I want to make with respect to strategy in life. And this is something I only truly learned very recently in this level of detail, at least. There are certain elements to what I'm about to share that I've already used in my life quite a lot. But there's one point in which I'll share I've really faltered. And I'm going to try to correct that myself, I should say, and engage this proper strategy that I'll suggest in the end in my selection of hospice provider, if it comes to that. So, strategy. There were some recent studies done. Actually, they're not that recent. I think this was done in the 80s, to be honest. Maybe the 90s, something like that. Because they used diskettes. I mean, golly. Who in the world remembers diskettes? I mean, I'm aging. God, I'm old. Anyway, so I think it was in the 80s, actually, when they did this. But they were actually looking at game strategy. But don't let that name fool you, okay? Because they learned quickly that this is a strategy solution that can be engaged in pretty much anything in real life. So what they did is they created sort of an AI personality. I mean, not true AI. It's really as simple as an if-then statement, okay? Or it's a variation of game strategies on where they compare each different strategy to the others and see which ones win. And I know this sounds silly because I'm talking about game strategy, but don't let that name fool you. So they basically made up a game where the computer's personality, which is really an if-then statement, it's not complex AI, but it's rather simple. So they create this strategy to where they made a bunch of nice strategies, some kind of in the middle strategies, some what they call nasty strategies, and random, just totally random strategies, okay? And the goal of the game, I guess, if you want to call it that, is that each strategy, when paired against another, must collect the highest number of coins per turn. And how they respond and how they do it is a variation indicated by the strategy that they've basically uploaded and told it to do. And it ranges from always nice, which means they're always agreeable, okay? They're always willing to say yes. And that's positive because you can select 3 coins per turn, okay? The objective is to collect coins, so bear with me, okay? If you engage a nice strategy, generally you can get up to 3 coins. If you engage a nasty strategy, where you're mean, you defect, that's what they called it. If you defect, you get 6 coins. But then the other strategy in the next turn has to react to your negative defection. And it could be anywhere from always nice, where they just are nice every time, no matter what you do. And that's where you're basically a total pushover. You just go 3, 3, 3, 3, 3 forever. And then nasty all the way through. 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Wow, that got really weird. Quickly, 6, 6, 6. I didn't mean to do that. Number of the beast. Interesting. Anyway. But when you're nasty and the other nice strategy responds accordingly and is nasty back, and you're both nasty, basically you both collect no coins. The only way you can collect coins, 6 coins, being nasty, is if the other strategy is nice in this particular turn. If they're also nasty and they also defect in response to your defection, right? Stay with me. No one gets coins. 0, 0, 0, 0. You know, so. And it can be anywhere, like I said, from always nice to always nasty. And what they discovered is, I'm going to shorten this as best as I can. I'm so sorry. What they found out is, actually, being the nice guy wins in the end, for the most part. When you look at the big picture, being nice generally scored higher than all the nasty strategies. No joke. And that doesn't mean you're always nice, mind you. It could be that you respond very negatively to nasty, so you get nasty back. And it could be something like, well, I'll just cut to the chase. That what they found to be the best strategy, which they called tit for tat. And that was the strategy, it's considered a nice strategy, mind you, that the other strategy's action, that is if they defect and do something nasty, the tit for tat will respond accordingly and be nasty back. Okay? And then if the other strategist responds to that, goes, ooh, I didn't like that, so I was nasty again, and now we both collected no coins, so I'm going to be nice on the next turn. And then the tit for tat will say, oh, you are nice, then I'll be nice too. Yay, we both get 6 coins. Or no, we both get 3 coins, excuse me, sorry. So how you respond to the other strategies and how they treat you through this term, they call it defection. It's really basically a harm. It's just a general harm to the strategist. It can vary quite a lot, but they found overall the nice strategies, for the most part, performed better than any of the nasty strategies that were prone to defect more. Okay? Stay with me, please. Anyway. And as I said, the strategy that scored as best when paired against every single other strategy they came up with, dozens of them, of nice configurations and nasty configurations and mediocre configurations. I mean, literally dozens upon dozens of ways. If it's like you're nice twice, they'll be nice once, but then they'll be nasty again. And I mean, it's just dozens of different configurations. Okay, but it's relatively simple. It's not like AI today. It's really just like a Q-basic if-then statement, right? Wow, that's dating me again. Q-basic is just an old basic programming language where you say if something is this, then do this. And that's really all it is. It's an if-then statement. That's simple. That's all it is. And so, yeah, the tit for tat one scored above every single other strategy. Pretty much every single time. I mean, yeah, it won out every other strategy in the long run. And what they did is they capped it at 200 turns, let's say. You know, your turn, my turn, next turn, next turn, next turn. You're very familiar with this concept when you're in turn-based strategy games. If anyone out there plays Civilization, Europa Universalis, EU4, whatever it's on now, even though it's not really based on a turn, it kind of is, but anyway, I still think it's based on turn. There's a timer on each turn, so the turns go regardless of what you do. If you're not doing anything, time will still move forward. Whereas in Civilization, you have the game basically stops until you respond. So there's that difference. Anyway, if there's any gamers out there, you know what I'm talking about. And so, yeah, I've been exposed to this, too. I mean, I've played turn strategy games a lot. It's one of my favorite things to do. I love strategy games. I'm a total geek with that. I love it. You found someone out about me. Yay. I play Civilization, EU4, and all those games. So, yes, I play little kid games on my computer. They're fun, okay? Anyway. The tit for tat one is a really simple strategy. It is that you're nice the first round, right? But if the other strategy is nasty, they defect ever in any turn. When it's your turn again, you react accordingly. You're nasty back. But now it's waiting for how the other strategy responds once it's been nasty back. It might be nasty again. Bam. Nasty again is what the first tit for tat one will do. And the other one might be like, okay, this isn't working out for us, because now we're being nasty to each other and both scoring 0, which is the result of both being nasty. So, I guess now I'm going to be nice, let's say. And then the tit for tat goes, oh, you were nice. Then I'll be nice too. And then they go, oh, be nice again. I'll be nice to you moving forward. And then maybe they go, oh, I'm going to defect again because now I'm taking advantage of you. Oh, nope, back to nasty. So basically, tit for tat will just respond exactly in the way how the other player performs. If they defect, they do something bad, the tit for tat strategy will respond accordingly immediately, but is very quick to be nice again if the other player, the other strategy is nice. It's quite simple in a lot of degrees, right? I mean, it is. If someone hurts you, react accordingly. Don't be a pushover, right? If someone is nice to you, be nice. And if you have no indication of what someone will do, start being nice. There's no reason to be nasty. Okay? Because, yeah, if both players are defecting against each other, they both get no coins or no points at the end of this. So, like I said, the tit for tat is just they respond accordingly and quickly to what the other strategy does. But it doesn't hold a grudge. And what they found were these key points using game theory on a strategy. Number one is be very clear and precise with your expectations of what you want, okay? If you are nebulous or if you're mean and nasty right away, it's not going to work. You have to be clear and precise as to what you want. Now, it's perfectly fine to be nice on every first go because that's the best way to be, they found. But if the other team is nasty, they'll respond right back and be nasty, then they get no points. Being nasty only gets 6 points if the other side is is actually nice again. So if you're always nice, you're never going to win. You can't be a pushover, right? So that's the third point. I know I went from 1 to 2 to 3 very quickly. Again, 1 is be clear and precise with your expectations. Okay? Number 2, though, is don't be a pushover. Respond immediately and unequivocally if you are harmed. Okay? And 3, don't hold a grudge. If the other player reacts and is nice back because they realize there's nothing good about being mean this whole time, then you can be nice right back to them. And they found, again, that this strategy, tit for tat, which is just responding precisely to how the other player responds, and they respond immediately. Take action immediately. That's a huge part of this, okay? But don't hold a grudge. That's all it is. That's literally the highest scoring strategy of every personality in this analysis. Be nice initially. There's no reason to be nasty. And then if the other side is nasty to you, you react immediately and decisively. So in the first round, state clearly what you want and what you expect. You expect niceness. Okay? If they're mean, take immediate action. Can't be delayed. That's key. And 3, though, don't hold a grudge. If the other player is now nice, okay, be nice back. That's literally in their analysis out of dozens of other, permeations of these personalities they coded. And, I mean, I'm not going to get into all the various personalities they put into this game theory analysis they did back in the 80s. But in every single game in the long run, which was capped at 200 basically turns for each player, the tit-for-tat one scored decisively higher than any other strategy. Now, you're going to be asking, why on earth am I talking about game strategy? That's because they found, frankly, that this was pretty much unequivocally consistent with how you manage your life. Up to and including major diplomatic actions in history. I'm not kidding there. It's been demonstrated before. When we look at history of how these different nations or peoples may react to each other. And again, tit for tat always comes out ahead. So, nice guy performs first. That's the good news. But you can't be a pushover. You have to be decisive and responsive after being clear and defining your expectations. And if they treat you badly, you take immediate retribution. If they are nice back, though, don't hold a grudge. Be nice too. It's that simple. And that came out ahead of everything else. Now, there was one condition that they forgot about, though. Here's key also to my situation. They found that if you told each strategy that there is a turn limit of, like, say, 200 turns, then it doesn't hurt anyone to be nasty to try to get 6 points, or 6 coins, as they call it, but 6 points, on turn 199, right? Okay? But the problem is, if now the other player's expecting them to be nasty on turn 199, because they don't care, it's going to be the last turn next, might as well try to get 6 points in the end and get ahead, right? What they found is, if the other strategy knows that's coming, they're going to be nasty too, right? At turn now 198. So the other player says, oh, well, if they're going to do that, start doing it at 198, I'm going to start being nasty at 197. And so on, turn 196, 195, all the way to the very second turn, which everybody loses. Which is fascinating to me, okay? That clearly demonstrated that if there was a known time limit, both strategies completely fail. Everything fails. No one gets ahead. It's terrible. It's apocalypse, right? No, it's just everyone dies, basically. If they know there's a time limit. And that, to me, is fascinating. Now, again, I know it's called game theory, game strategy, I guess, whatever. And I refer to real games I play, video games I play in life that are kind of like this. But that all being said, this does apply to life. And I'm going to illustrate that moving forward. So as I said, this is reflected in real life. Even the time limit issue is reflected in real life. So for example, with respect to the time limit, think of every disaster or nuclear apocalypse movie or whatever it is in every movie you've seen. As soon as people are aware that unmitigated disaster is on its way, they go crazy. There's rioting, there's looting, people are shooting each other, doing anything to get ahead, So if you know there's a time limit, everyone kind of basically freaks out because they know that they have to do something and it doesn't matter anymore. So it's all me for the most part, or me and my family or something, you know what I mean? So, this is reflected in all those disaster movies with the time limit. When you look at that, and probably in a lot of real life cases, look at what happened in Katrina. Look what happened after 9/11. I don't know. People freaked out. Yeah, so it's also reflected, as I stated, in something as far away as military action and international diplomacy. Now I'm back in my comfort zone a little bit because I have traveled around the world as a representative of the United States before. Many times, actually. And also, frankly, I had to go through a lot of diplomatic training. I've done a lot with that. A lot of stories there to talk about. But I mainly it was just as a student, I wasn't like spooky something. This is going way back. Well, not way back, I guess, but this is going back, 2 decades. So, again, God, I'm old. But yeah, so I'm back in my comfort zone with international diplomacy because I actually do have some experience with that. I've been to the American Embassy in Beijing. I've been in briefings in bug-free rooms. That's a total trip. The bug-free briefing room at the... I don't know if I can talk about this. I'm not going to tell you what it is, how it is, and how it works, so I'm just going to skip that. Sorry. But I got briefings in bug-free rooms, and it was, I've been through this. I've been to Shanghai for a conference. I've been to the House of Parliament in the UK. I met with PMs there, actually. No, I'm not kidding. And went to Oxford, actually. Somerville College, and some of you know about Somerville College. That's a kind of a silly joke there because it used to be an all-girls school. It's not anymore, and it wasn't when I went, okay? I wasn't a girl. But it does have some illustrious female alumni, such as Margaret Thatcher and Indira Gandhi. I'm not making that up. They both went to the same school as I did, Somerville. Oxford. Look it up. It's a good school. Anyway, I went there as part of a diplomatic thing and student training, like a student exchange thing, kind of thing. It's hard to explain. Anyway, I've been to the London School of Economics, actually. I've It's a very prestigious school, and I've been there in London, and I've gone through training there at the LSE, London School of Economics, and been in bug-free rooms with U.S. consuls and ambassadors, and been in diplomatic vehicles, and was even held against my will in a communist country. Minor things. I'm not making it up, unfortunately. This, again, they're not delusions of grandeur. And sometimes things suck when you're looking at my history. Like when I was held against my will in a communist country for a little bit. It was a little scary. Anyway, if you look at diplomatic history, you'll see this same tit-for-tat strategy played out occasionally in history, and it works for both players, okay? Example. Really easy example. SALT 1 and SALT 2 during the 80s and into the early 90s, I guess. I'm not sure when SALT 2 expired. Might have been as late as the 90s. I'd have to look it up. But anyway, if you don't know what SALT 1 and 2 are, they are the Strategic Arms Limitation Treaties 1 and 2, which were signed by the President of the United States and the Premier and General Secretary of the Soviet Union, in both cases Mikhail Gorbachev, and I know at least in one case it was Reagan. Maybe it was Reagan again in number 2. I think it was Reagan again in number 2. But it was carried forward through George H.W. Bush. Anyway, I'm not getting into deep politics here. I don't care what your politics are, if you like these people or don't. I mean, I also refer to Mikhail Gorbachev, and people often refer to him as like some liberal Westerner now. He's not. His goal was to save communism through glasnost and perestroika. When he instituted these policies, he was not trying to tear down communism. He was trying to save it. And to this very day, he's an avowed communist. Or is he dead now? Anyway, to the very end, at least I know, he was an avowed communist. He's probably dead now, but anyway, yeah, so the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaties had a little mantra to them that could kind of summarize how they were played out, okay? And that was simply trust, but verify. Meaning that we will trust you to engage in these strategic arms limitations. And if you don't know what strategic arm limitations are, I'm so sorry. I just assume everyone knows. But it basically means nuclear arsenals, okay? Those are called strategic arms in the military parlance. Yeah, these were a big deal to start to pull back the insane stockpiles of nuclear weapons that both the Soviet Union and the United States had created. And it worked. It did scale back these nuclear arsenals significantly. It really worked. And it was simple. We're going to trust you to do the right thing. But we're going to verify it. We're going to send inspectors there to look and verify that you're doing what you're doing. And if you are, sweet. Moving on. Yeah, we'll keep trusting you to keep doing it. And we'll verify it later. Then, hey, we'll send inspectors again. Cool. You're still doing it. Excellent. That's all what that means. Now, think how similar that sounds to the tit-for-tat strategy. Basically, be nice, but if they defect, that is, they don't do what you want them to do, you take immediate, clear action against them. Don't wait. So, that's really what enabled a lot of these very important treaties on a global scale to spare humanity as best as we could from a nuclear annihilation. And you have to consider, too, as well, when you have that many stored even perhaps in inactive bunkers, but still active nuclear weapons, the more you have, the more likely it takes just one to get loose. And that's terrifying. Slap one Merv in a suitcase parked in front of the Capitol building. Boom. DC's flattened. Or do it in any other city. Put it in Times Square. All in Midtown Manhattan's gone. Could you imagine? From one suitcase. So it's really scary. And eliminating these weapons, truly not just taking them out of active service, but actually eliminating them, was a move forward to try to reduce that probability of ever happening. Now, problem is, to get away with that, to make sure it never happens, you have to be right every single time. All that has to happen is that the opposing team, those who want to get a hold of a nuclear weapon and put it in a briefcase and level a city, be it London, New York, DC, Moscow, Beijing, whatever, it takes just one time for them to be right, and it's all over. That's where it's really scary when you're dealing with terrorism. In fact, this is not a fun story, I should say, but a little side bit story. Back to Margaret Thatcher. God, I deviate way too much. But there was a time during the Troubles. Now, if you don't know what the Troubles are, that was the period of time in which the IRA, Irish Republican Army in Northern Ireland, was engaging in sort of asymmetrical warfare in isolated pockets against the United Kingdom to return Northern Ireland to the Irish Republic. Ulster, in other words. It apparently, when Ireland broke off from the United Kingdom, it was once part of it, broke it off, Ulster, the county of Ulster, because it was overwhelmingly still filled with Protestants as opposed to Irish Catholics, they wanted to stay in the United Kingdom, which was largely Protestant. They were terrified to go away with the Catholics. But then the IRA came out and did these asymmetrical warfare attacks in the United Kingdom it was terrorism, yeah. And very scarily, they were acutely aware of what I just said earlier with respect to being right every time, because there was one failed IRA attack in London that was stopped successfully by Scotland Yard. And there, I guess it's is it MI6 there, or is it MI5? Sorry, MI5, not MI6. What am I thinking? But it was successfully stopped. But the IRA sent a message somehow. I don't know the details how they sent this to her. I think they left a note somewhere or something stupid. But it merely said, "You were right today, and you stopped us. But remember, you've got to be right every single time to succeed. For us to perform a horrific act of terror against you." They didn't say that per se, but they alluded to it. For us to succeed is what they said. We only have to be right once. That's terrifying. Oh my God. Anyway, I deviated so bad. Salt 1 and 2, therefore, were very good step forwards in eliminating nuclear caches of these atomic weapons that could be horribly misused if just one got away, is my point. And so by eliminating them, the Soviet Union and the United States realized we're actually eliminating some probability, hopefully, of this happening. Even though they only have to be right once for it to happen, which is terrifying. So, Salt 1 and 2 are an example of this tit-for-tat game strategy that I spoke of, okay? And that's just one example. If you go through history, if you go through military history, World War II, and everything else, you will see this tit-for-tat performed. And also, if you don't respond decisively and precisely, immediately when harmed, you fail. I hate to say this. 9/11, what do? We invaded Iraq? What? But Bin Laden wasn't even there. So we eventually got to Afghanistan, but we couldn't find him. We were too late. He was in cave after cave, and now in that safe house in Pakistan, where he was finally caught and killed under Obama. But yeah, you see examples of this tit-for-tat strategy in real history and real military strategy. And you can see it in real life. That's the point here, guys, I'm trying to make. And I have to confess, I'm weak on one of these major points, the few numbers I gave you, what you got to do for tit-for-tat to work. And that is respond immediately and decisively. That is something I admit in my life I have faltered on many times. I struggle with that. Because I generally assume what can be assumed as malice in many cases can be attributed to stupidity. That old axiom, or that old razor, or whatever you call it. And I really held on to a lot of that in my life. And that really actually tripped me up. Because if someone was to harm me, I didn't react immediately. I would probably hang back a little bit and see what else they did, because I wasn't sure. Was that malicious? Or were they just being stupid? That was my problem. Okay. But, according to the strategy doesn't matter what they were intent was. If you were clear about your expectations, but that's also number one. This comes first. And they defect on you, they harm you. Knowing those expectations, you've got to take action decisively and immediately. You can't wait for the second or third time they do it. And that's where I struggle. So that's where this comes around to this conundrum I face today. If it does present itself with respect to my hospice care, that is, my previous provider absolutely defected on me according to this strategy theory. Absolutely, their intent doesn't matter. So long as I made clear, precise communication of what I expected, which I actually did, I think. I flatly told them, I disagree with your assessment when they first came to me, and I knew that this was going to be a problem. I flatly said it. Well, I disagree for these reasons. And then they still took that action to kick me out. In my mind, their act was egregious. For God's sakes, I have severe pulmonary hypertension, terminal stage heart failure, stage 4 kidney failure. I apparently survived a pulmonary embolism a few years back, and a major episode of some sort of cardiac issue that is unknown, honestly, to this day, what caused it. Just 9 months ago. My God. To me, this is absurd. It's egregious to me to kick me out of hospice care when I clearly communicated I need it. And then when I got the numbers in response to their action, it communicated clearly things actually got far worse. Again, the BP went from 97 to over 1,300 in a couple of weeks. My heart was straining. The one blood test for the BP, I think, was a fluke. I think that was an anomaly, frankly. I don't think something was done right. Because before this and after this blood test, frankly, they were always that high, I have to confess. Every time I've seen it, pretty much, except in my youth, maybe in my 20s, I think it was decent. So, I feel, no, I hate that phrase. I think, it's not based on fifis. I think that their act against me was clearly egregious. So they decide to welcome me back into the warm bosom of a familiar place. Which sounds enticing, doesn't it? Do I take it? Or do I simply sit on it until I get another hospice service to take me on? Or, conversely though, I thought about I could take their option, but always transfer and fire them later if another hospice accepts me. But that's not reacting immediately, is it? That's the problem. I actually was really going for that move. Maybe like, well, if I don't have any other options, it makes sense to take this. And if the other options bear fruition, I'll fire them and move at that point. That's not taking immediate action. It will fail. That's what this strategy says, at least. For the most part, it's likely to fail. Also, with respect to Medicare and their regulations and their stupid, what was it? Hospice guidelines. I don't know. They're called guidelines, and I found no enforcement action of these guidelines. I'm like, a guideline is not really enforceable, is it? So I try to look up cases where there was action taken, that is a disciplinary action against a doctor, against a service, a civil action, anything, by any agency out there against a hospice provider for failing to follow these guidelines. And I found absolutely nothing. If you are out there and listening to this and you know of one, God, send it to me. Go immediately to my Spotify site where you can email me with respect to the podcast, or get a hold of me. People can do it. You can find me. Oh God, don't call me on my cell. That freaked me out. I had someone texting me randomly. I didn't know who they were. That's a little spooky. But you can email me, I'm sure. Just go to the Spotify homepage and send a message. That's all it takes. If you know that, let me know. I found nothing. I found absolutely no case of any action or disciplinary result of anything whatsoever for failing to follow these federal guidelines. And in general, that makes sense, because guidelines, how do you enforce a guideline? That's a misnomer. And I have experience with this specifically in the legal world. Frankly, I've been in the legal reference data world, which a lot of people don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Excuse my French. But in the early days, let's say, there was something called the Independent Reference Services Guidelines, or the IRSG. And it was a guideline. So what it was a bunch of basically reference service businesses. I know you don't know what that probably is. I'm not going to get into it. It's not important. For people that got together, they say, hey, let's at least create some independent industry guidelines to adhere to. So the government does not step in and regulate it and make it worse for everyone, right? And in my world, that was the case when I started on this journey in my current career. Not current, I guess. Most recent career, I should say. That's depressing, but that's more accurate. But the government did anyway. They turned around and said, hey, we are going to take some enforcement action with respect to the service. And that was done so through the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act of, when was it, 99? Maybe. I'll have to look it up. But anyway, that made the IRSG, the guidelines, obsolescent. They didn't matter anymore. Now there was a federal act regulating what we did, and we then had to adhere to it. The guidelines no longer mattered. So generally, in my experience, guidelines are just not enforceable. There's not a lot of action taken against that. At least, in a government regulatory or disciplinary sense, right? That's my experience, at least. So, if no one, or if anyone, I should say, knows different, oh God, please let me know. I found nothing. All what I found was every single hospice in the world posting these stupid guidelines on their site. That's all I found. I found nothing on a government site or specifically with respect to enforcement of these guidelines. I didn't find anything. So I don't understand the huge fear of violating these guidelines. Maybe it's fear of government intervention like it was in our case, in our industry. So that might be it. That might be the simple answer. They don't want the government to step in and make it worse than it is. But that's kind of a lackluster fear to take a serious action against a clear case of someone needing hospice care. That's my problem. It's clearly a defection, according to this game strategy. And it clearly states I have to take immediate action against it, which means I can't wait for another service to come up and offer me something and then just move to that later if I don't have any other choices. That's what it says. Now, I'm not saying I've decided that. I'm torn. In fact, I'm getting a visit tomorrow afternoon by my former provider. And I'm just going to see how that kind of plays out. So more to come on that later. But I want to try to embrace that key part that came out of this strategy analysis that was done so many years ago. They clearly defected. They took an action against me after I set clear expectations. So my reaction cannot be delayed according to that strategy. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it. Means I have to decide if I'm going to do that. That's where I'm sort of struggling, as always, in my life with that right now. Because I've always followed the razor. Don't attribute to malice what can be easily attributed to stupidity. Anyway, my dog is begging my attention right now. So, I'll probably have to end this segment post haste. So, let me try to wrap things up because I know I've been rambling far too long and about so many topics. I am so apologetic. If you have made it this long into the podcast, you are a trooper. You are a generalissimo of listening. You have not just lent me your ear, but you've given me a portion of your miserable life. To be overly dramatic, perhaps. But in all seriousness, I do sincerely thank you for listening to my voice and my incessant rambling. But I forgot to wrap up one little thing with respect to the timeline. As I said before, timeline makes everything go basically sideways. Everything goes pear-shaped. Everything goes bad. And you see it in disaster movies, like I said. Medicare's guidelines is all wrapped around time limits. 6 months, or 9 months, 6 months, 3 months, 3 months. I mean, for them to keep recertifying you, there's a time limit where you have to show progressing or worsening symptoms. And if you're going from 3 month to 3 month, and there's no change, but in month 5, it's horrific. They can't recertify you in the second month to begin with. It's ridiculous, in my opinion. Because when you put in a timeline, everything doesn't work. Both sides lose. That's the problem that the strategy theory found. So that's the problem I find with those federal guidelines. It's clearly a problem. So that being said, do I even engage that strategy? If I know it's not going to work, based that there's a time limit that I'm aware of and they're aware of, is all of this moot. According to game theory and strategy, everything I just shared, yes, that makes any decision I make next completely moot. Throw it out the window. Doesn't matter. Both sides are going to lose. Nothing. Great. Thanks, federal guidelines. God. What a fantastic way to handle people in dire medical situations. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry. It is. So now I don't know if I should engage that strategy correctly or not, when I know full well there's time limits on it, which means nothing I do matters. That's the sad part. That might be the reality of it. Nothing I do matters. I will be held to the whims of the other team, the other side, that is the stupid medical director that decided to kick me out of hospice as I was in terminal heart failure. It's that time limit that allowed her to do that. And I appealed it twice. I lost both appeals with Medicare. Well, the independent group that does that for Medicare, which is really weird. They call it quality control. I don't know. They're full thing. I don't know what they look. I think all they look at for the appeals that the medical director, who is the one who has the sole responsibility of making that decision, makes it or not. So if they see that someone else made the decision, they raise the red flag, so you can't do that. But they see the medical director just made that decision, boom. They don't care circumstances of the decision, whether it was right or wrong. They say there's nothing done wrong here, which is really, again, messed up. Gosh. So it seems to me, gosh, it's just not going to matter what I do. I'll be forever at the mercy of this stupid condition, and both sides are just going to lose. Let's face it, they lost a customer when they when they didn't kiss me, when they kicked me out. They lost a paying customer. They lost revenue. So they lost and I lost. It matches perfectly with strategy in which I describe both sides losing, especially when they know there's a time limit. Both sides lose. Bam! There, demonstrated in real life, right here with my actual situation with hospice care in general. It doesn't matter. Wow. That's an epiphany, and that's depressing. I really don't want to end this podcast with, it doesn't matter what I do. But that might be the reality of it. sad. No? Alas. Good news. I'll have all night to toss and turn and worry about it. Yay! Lucky me. After all that talk, I come down to it doesn't matter. Oh my God, that's depressing, but that may very well be the case. Sports fans, I don't know what else to say. That is the actual conclusion that was demonstrated here and has actually been demonstrated in real life and in game theory. My God. That's fascinating and depressing. I hate when that happens. It's sort of not unlike, the thought of your bellowing cries of death for mercy to the empty sky goes unheard. And it's just as useless. Because you're just going to die and stop existing forever anyway. Yeah, and some people, well, a lot of people, even me to some respect, that's a pretty depressing outlook, right? But frankly, I do think that's the reality of it. I have no reason to think otherwise, to be honest. I've seen no evidence or indicia for me to go so far as to say, aha, magic is the answer. No, I'm not, it's just, I can't do that. But I can again say thank you, dear listener, for chiming in to this abhorrently lengthy podcast. I greatly appreciate it. And if you wish to contact me or support the podcast further, again, just go to my Spotify homepage, Google it, you'll find it. Or join me on Patreon at patreon.com/mydogwilleatmyface. And you can just drop a shekel in my bucket and you can see updates, chats with me directly, even I'll talk to you one-on-one, even, it doesn't matter who you are. There's pictures of me and my puppy dog on there and some of my life. If you're a nosy stalker, it's really wonderful for you. I am so glad for the first time ever I live in a very secure building with armed guards going around it. And no access allowed unless you have the correct fobs. Anyway, that will be all. I promise for today. Again, thank you for being there with me. Because I don't want my bellowing, nonsensical rants to just steer empty into that empty sky above for nothing. Perhaps someone out there will hear it. One of you. And maybe gain some extra perspective on things. Maybe find a way to improve your own life. And that's all I can hope for. With that, I now say adieu.